Hi, Kim. How are you today?
I'm doing okay.
So, what would you like to talk about today?
I'm just over the course of the next couple months, there's going to be a lot of life changes and moving pieces. And so I'm trying to kind of figure out, I don't do well with change. And so I'm just trying to figure out how I can kind of like, I guess, mentally prepare myself for changes.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Okay. Um, Tell me a little more about that.
So my daughter and son-in-law are planning to move back home. They've been in Atlanta since even before they got married, they both moved to Atlanta for my daughter to take her dream job. They want to move back to be closer to grandparents because they want to try to start a family.
Mhm.
So that's the plan changes daily, and I don't do well with unknowns. And so I'm like, what do you need from me? Do you need me to help you pack? Do you need us to come down there and help you move? Like that kind of stuff. So there's that aspect, and then there's my job. And so everything feels like we're throwing it up in the air and letting it land wherever it's going to.
Oh, I see. And how is all those changes, how are all those changes impacting your daily life?
I think it's just I don't know if it's stress or if it's fear, but it's like the unknown. And I do well in black and white. I do not do well in gray. And so I think that's where like I can keep myself up at night going, okay, well, if they make this decision, what's going to happen? If they decide that, then what's going to happen? And so a lot of times it's things out of my control. But that makes me panic even more because I know I don't have control over it.
Yeah. Yeah, those are all hard things to figure out.
And my husband wants to just be able to tell them things to do, whereas I'm trying to be more of like um, I don't know, like maybe an advisory role, just letting them be able to tell what they want to tell and then like maybe ask a question here or there, but not be too invasive.
Mhm. And what does your husband think about that?
Well, he has always a very clear picture of what he thinks reality should be. And um, I think in some ways, my daughter's more like me. Our son is more like him, but he tries to micromanage her, and she doesn't want to have any part of that because, in her mind, I'm financially independent. I'm married. The decisions I make are my decisions to make. Um, and he just has a really hard time letting that just be.
Oh, um, what have you tried to change those things?
I think that I keep trying to remind him that that is our job is to be advisory. It's not our job to be like, I don't want to say dictator because that sounds so overbearing. And he's not an overbearing person, but he just has really strong opinions. And so I don't know that he's figured out yet when he starts offering opinions. My son-in-law and our daughter just shut down. It's like too much information. I didn't call to get that. I need to just go. And
Mm,
so it kind of feels like sometimes I'm wearing the black and white shirt and I'm having to play referee between all three of them.
mm, okay. Well, it sounds like you're going through some changes, and um, the changes are also impacting your daughter and her husband.
Mhm.
They're going through some changes, and you and your husband are having a difference in opinion on how to manage the situation. He has one style and you have another style. And there's no right or wrong, but you feel like you're like trying to keep the peace, maybe
Yeah.
about
Yeah, exactly.
everything that's going on,
Yes.
trying to tease people maybe.
Yeah.
Do you feel overwhelmed by the situation?
Sometimes, I mean, I think if I can catch it quick enough, I can go, okay, she's a grown woman. She's not asked for my opinion, so therefore I don't need to give an opinion. But, when you spend 20 something years of your life offering opinion or guidance or trying to raise them to be independent, and then all of a sudden it feels like they don't need you anymore.
Mhm,
Um, it's not like overwhelmed. It's just, does my opinion carry weight anymore? Is my opinion important? I don't know. And my daughter and I are really close, so, like, we don't even have to say something and we can know what the other person's thinking. And
mhm,
so that's where, like, when she got married, um, it was hard because I made my peace with her moving to Atlanta and being away from home. Like, I adjusted to that, but
mhm,
then she got married, and it's like, okay, I'd gotten used to them being away, and
mhm,
now they're coming back, and it's like, okay, I don't know what that relationship looks like now that they're gonna be close and not far, and I don't
mhm.
know, it's just a lot of things to think about.
Yeah, yeah, that's a hard place to be in. How would the conversation go if you were to have a conversation with them or with your daughter about what that relationship would be like now?
I think that one of the most difficult things with her is that if it's just me and her having a conversation, we can speak very openly. But oftentimes, what happens is she'll say, "Hey, mom, do you have a few minutes to talk?" And so, I'll text her back and say, "I can call you in an hour or whatever." But then, whenever she's at home, then my son in law gets on the conversation. And I'm not as connected to him just because I haven't been around him a whole lot.
Yeah,
And so it's like, I think the conversation would look differently if I was just talking to her.
okay, okay. And if you what would, what would her reaction be if you just asked to speak just with her on her by herself about
I
this?
did try that once.
Mhm,
And I mean, it worked one time that she called while she was on her way home from work. Cause I said to her, I said, I really like when just you and I can talk from time to time because I miss that. And I wasn't trying to manipulate her or make her feel guilty, but it's just a different dynamic when it's just she and I.
mhm,
And so I said, usually when I'm getting home or driving home from school, you're usually getting off of work because she's an hour ahead. And so it's like the perfect time for both of us to be uninterrupted and undistracted. And so, like, she did it once, but then pretty much every time after that has been from home and he's there.
mhm. Yeah, yeah, it sounds like it's hard to find that time for both of you to connect again the way you used to,
Yeah.
and maybe you miss that part of your relationship, now that she has her partner.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, okay, how do we redefine new normal? Because, I mean, we would think nothing of like if we wanted to go to the farmer's market on a Saturday and we would just set that time and go, the two of us. But, you're working now around two husbands instead of just she and I. And I just don't know what that looks like and if that will just return back to what it was before she was married and moved away.
Yeah. Um, how would he take it if she told him sometimes I need time just for me and my mom, to reconnect or
It's just kind of funny because there's times like last night we were talking and I could hear him talking in the background because she's pretty quiet like I am, but he's not.
Mm,
And so I could hear like his whole conversation with his mom and dad in the other room. And
yeah.
so then when he gets off that phone call, he comes into the room where my daughter is, and I'm on FaceTime with her. So I didn't see him, but I could hear him. And so he starts telling me, hey, I got another job offer. It looks like I might be moving sooner than Reagan back home.
Mhm.
And so this is, I mean, he just started talking. And she basically looked at him and went, you just hijacked my conversation with my mom. And so it's almost like it is not World War III, but it's like she tried to go, get it out of here. I'm trying to talk to my mom.
Yeah,
And I was like, don't put me in the middle of this. I just want to have a conversation.
yeah,
So I kind of know what he's going to think about that. But I think maybe it could be different when they come back because we can always just go to Starbucks or to an ice cream place or something and just talk, the two of us. And then that cuts out him from interrupting.
yeah, yeah. It sounds like, yeah, maybe there's no maybe clear boundaries with him as far as like when you're talking with your daughter and he has no problem just jumping into the conversation.
Yeah.
And it may not necessarily be a bad thing for him. He's probably thinking, I'm not doing anything, I don't know what he's thinking, but you know, it sounds like your daughter and you are feeling like you want space to talk,
Yeah.
share information, um, without the interruptions.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, because that's the thing. It's like we have a certain rhythm when we talk. So we
Yeah.
can be very efficient with our conversation. He likes to use a lot of words, and we're just not that kind of people. And so, I think I try to give him latitude because he's an only child, whereas my daughter has a brother. And
Oh,
so she's learned to have to wait her turn. And so, but when it's her turn, she wants her turn. And so
right.
I think that's why the two of them get into it is because it's just you and your mom and dad. But I don't get to talk to my mom all the time. So I want my time. And so I think that's where he's not understanding that dynamic.
Oh, I see. I see. Are you feeling frustrated?
A little bit. Yeah, because I mean, it would be one thing if it's just every once in a while. But if we're talking and they're both at home, he's going to come into the conversation somehow.
Mhm. What would it look like to have a conversation maybe with him about some boundaries?
If I knew him better, I would say I think that would go off okay. It's just we're still kind of trying to build our relationship. And since they've been away, we only see each other maybe 3 times a year. Now it's going to be whenever. And if there are grandkids involved, then it will be more frequent. So I'm a little bit nervous about approaching things from that perspective because we're still trying to build that relationship.
Okay. So right now your son-in-law is not respecting your time with your daughter, your conversation, your space to communicate with her as you want to, and it's been difficult for you.
Yeah. I don't think he's being malicious about it. I think he's just clueless, which I mean, you can give a pass on that if you're
Yeah.
clueless versus just, I don't want you to have time with your mom, so therefore I'm going to hijack it. I don't think it's that at all. I think he's just used to when I want to talk, people listen. And so therefore you will listen to me. And
Mm,
I'm like, I'm not a confrontational person. So it's not like I'm going to get up in his face and go, can you let us have a moment? Because I really need to talk to my daughter. I'm just not that person.
yeah. What attempts have you made to have just a one-on-one with him conversation, if any?
Um, it has not happened very often. There was one time where my daughter was out of town and I had gone to Atlanta for a conference, and my brother and sister lived there. And so he was home by himself, obviously, with my daughter out of town. And so she was like, well, you can always hang out with Jeremy. And I'm like, just the two of us and the dogs? I'm like, how did that work? And so we did dinner one night. But it's still just kind of a little awkward if she's not there because she's the common denominator. So
Right.
I'm like, this is a little awkward, and I'm not sure I want to do this night after night. So
Yeah.
I kind of did my one time, and that was it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Um, how would it, if you mentioned that your husband said maybe just be direct. What kind of conversations has he had about the situation with your daughter,
um,
son-in-law?
yeah, it's even, I don't want to say worse, but in a way it is because um he is, like I said, he's opinionated. And so my son-in-law is trying to break into the same world that my husband is in. And so my husband's trying to counsel him on, I just want you to know, like, have your eyes wide open about what this business is. And so he'll try to offer his opinion, but they can both be really stubborn and headstrong. And so I think my husband's thinking, I'm just trying to help the guy. Whereas my son-in-law is trying to go, I'm just trying to figure out my life. And he hasn't quite figured out that we want to try to help them and that there's no strings attached to that. We're just trying to help. And so I think that's where the two of them kind of butt heads. And so I tend to probably overstep now that I'm talking to you about this. I probably overstep in trying to rescue everybody just to keep the peace.
Mm.
Um, and so that's a me problem, I think. Also setting a boundary of just saying, y'all need to work it out. Like, leave me out of the mix. Y'all figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, well, tell me more about that. What would that look like to you if you did take a step back, if you did let them problem solve and just let them figure it out on their own? What would that look like to you?
The funny thing is, I think with my husband, he would just not have a conversation. If I'm not there, like, he won't necessarily have the conversation. But like, the interesting thing is he goes to Atlanta periodically for business. Like, he's there right now. And I said, are you going to get together with Reagan and Jeremy for dinner? Because that's sometimes what they do. And he goes, well, she hasn't contacted me in weeks, so I don't think so. Like, okay, I mean, that's our child. Like, I would think you would want to have dinner with, I mean, and if you don't want to have dinner with him, then you could just say that.
Mm.
But I'm like, to be petty because she hasn't contacted you first, like, it's a two-way street, buddy.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's just very different. Like, my relationship with our kids is very different than his. And so I kind of get the best and worst of both worlds. Like, if they're crying, they're angry, like, I tend to be the recipient of that. But, I mean, I also get like, hey, just wanted to, I got a promotion at work, or I got a bonus, or, that kind of thing. So I get good and bad, but he doesn't get most of that. Like,
Okay.
somehow they decided to reserve that for me.
Okay. And how does that impact, like, well, now you're thinking you want to take a step back and let them figure it out. How does that impact with your husband? Kind of, would that put him out of the loop if you did that? Because it sounds like you're the one that's kind of kind of moving the relationships together, or building kind of.
Yeah, I'm trying. I mean, because I think, I mean, it's a similar situation as me being alone with my son-in-law. It feels a little bit uncomfortable. And so with Reagan there, kind of buffers that. And so I think that's how my husband is handling my role in the situation, is you kind of serve as a buffer between me and Jeremy because you know him better than I do. But I'm like, I've made attempts to try to get to know him. Um, Whereas my husband's like, well, he doesn't listen to me anyway, so why would I try that? Um, and I think what's difficult is that um, my husband kind of puts me in the middle because, like, have you heard from the kids? What did they tell you? And I'm like, I don't know how many different ways I can say, you can call them and find out yourself. Like, but he always chooses to play the martyr in that, like, well, they just always call you, they never call me. And I'm like, I don't I don't know what you want from me. I mean, I just, I mean, that's just the relationship I have with our kids. I mean, whether they were in college or on a trip or something, they would text me, let me know they're okay, call me and tell me what's going on. And I mean, it just is like I'm not trying to run their life. And so I've tried to share with my husband, if you would just back off and let things be and not try to run their life, I think they would be more willing to come talk to you.
Hmm. Yeah. It sounds like um your husband is putting you in that position of like carrying the relationships and um in the middle of what's going on, instead of communicating directly with his own children, he's going to you as the messenger to go to them and then come back into him. And that could be overwhelmed. Are you overwhelmed by that? By always having to be the person that's kind of messaging back and forth, between.
Yeah, I think it's more frustration at this point than feeling overwhelmed. It's just like you can pick up the phone, or if you don't feel comfortable, like one of our kids loves to talk on the phone. Our son loves to just call. Our daughter loves more to text because she's very busy at work. And so it's just easier for her when she has free moments to text. And I'm like, whether you want to call them or whether you want to text them, you can do that too. It shouldn't always be on the kids to have to be the one to respond to you. And so it's just frustrating because it's like he's having like a pity party in the corner. It's like, well, woe is me. Why do they always call you and they never call me?
Hmm. Yeah.
And I don't know how to, like, any way that I try to talk to him about it, I feel like somehow it would hurt his feelings.
Hmm. And what would that look like if you just let him have his pity party and until let him go through that, and then not get involved with his, you know, wanting that attention of woe is me. Like, what would that look like from you if you just allowed him to experience that and not step in and be the savior?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think because when he's in that frame of mind, he tends to be kind of moody, to
Mhm.
put it nicely. And I mean, he's not a violent person or abusive or anything like that. It just somehow backfires on me, and I'm like, okay, I guess the more that I find my voice, which because growing up I couldn't really voice my opinion, and now I have an opinion, and I'm like, okay, words come out of my mouth, and I'm like, this is my opinion, so just listen. And sometimes I can come out with an opinion, and he was like, well, that was kind of harsh. And
Mhm.
I'm like, well, I don't mean it to be harsh, but I've told you the same thing. It feels like 100 times, and you're not listening to me.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like you're frustrated with that going in circles and you feel maybe ignored with
Yeah.
your boundaries that you're trying to set.
Yeah. I think it's just irritated,
Yeah.
right? Because when you try to set a boundary and people keep crossing over the border, it's nerve wracking.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, to summarize what we talked about, because we're getting close to time. It sounds like you're in a situation where your daughter and her husband are going to move back to be closer to you. And since she's moved away, the relationships, the dynamics of your relationships have kind of changed a little bit with her husband and her being away. And now she's coming back, and you're trying to figure out how your relationship is going to be this time, if it's going to be different or go back to being the way it used to be. And there's also the issue or the thing with your son-in-law not giving you the space to talk to your daughter freely, always interrupting and jumping into the conversations, and then you're trying to set your own boundaries with your, not being the messenger of everyone and trying to keep the peace and everyone together. And that's not that could be a very stressful situation to be in. That could be a very big stressor for you. So maybe we can pick up more about on this in our next session and talk about how to handle those stressors so that you
Yeah,
can feel better about
that'd
everything.
be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've given me a lot to think about today, so I really appreciate that. But yeah, I'd love to pick up next time.
Okay, sounds good. Well,
Okay.
thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you later.
Okay,
Okay. Oh,
good job.
how was that?
It was good. It was good. Yeah, definitely. From the last time, I think you did great. Um, in terms of feedback, I think your minimal encouragers were really great. And whether it was intentional or not, there were a couple of times where you used the minimal encouragers to almost create like a silence for me to like think about. It wasn't like a long pause, but it was enough for me to go, huh, I need to think about what she just said. So that was how I think that helped facilitate trying for me to clarify what I was thinking in my head.
Yeah.
So I thought that was good. Paraphrases and the paraphrases periodically were good because it let me know that you're still tracking with all the messiness of the situation.
Hmm.
Um, and then the summaries periodically, I thought those were really good too.
Hmm.
Um, and reflection of feeling, I thought that was good too. Because you know how she said, like, if you're not reflecting correctly, like the client will correct you or come up with a different feeling. But
Yeah.
I would say, like, let's say it was 10 times, I would say you probably hit like 9 out of the 10, eight,
Oh, wow.
8.5 out of the 10. So I think that was good.
Yeah.
Um, in terms of um, like area of growth, the only thing I would say is like when you were talking, like I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this. When you were listening to what I was saying, you were looking right at me.
Hmm.
But when you would try to think about what you were going to say next, you would be like kind of looking like this and
Yeah.
not making the direct eye contact. So
Okay.
that would be the only thing that I
Yeah.
would say because it kind of can break that concentration. Because I'm like, is she
Um,
looking for an answer in the sky? Is she like,
I was
like,
looking for an answer though. It's hard to phrase the questions. Like, I was like
yes,
started with what or how. So I was thinking like, I was, the non-counselor in me was automatically like trying to, give you like a question or a statement. But then
yeah,
I was trying to translate that into like using how or what first. So I was trying to
yes.
process that, and you saw that. So yeah.
But
Yeah.
other than that, it was really good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. Yeah, it wasn't so bad. So,
Yeah, because you
okay.
think you're not going to be able to fill that many minutes. And then it's like, okay, where'd the time go? I got to wrap this up.
Yeah, 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 it went fast. So, okay, let me stop the recording.